All right, Ecotopians, today we are segueing into the biotic aspects of ecosystems. And can't really separate abiotic from biotic aspects, so we're going to ease into it. And just to review, in a previous lecture, you should have learned about the equation of life on Earth, in which energy enters ecosystems, powers photosynthesis, and then leaves after respiration. So the combination of biomass and oxygen gives off carbon dioxide and hydrogen and gives off energy. So that was the equation of life on Earth. So when you look at the planet, you should now be thinking of it in terms of energy entering, being captured for a little while by photosynthesis by the biosphere, and then leaving again. So we're going to take a closer look at what exactly happens in the biosphere following photosynthesis. But I'm going to take a slightly different track. We are parts of the ecosystem, and everything out there eats, whether it's an animal or a plant or a bacterium or a fungus or whatever. Everything eats. So let's take a look at our food. What do we get from our food? Well, one of the things we get from our food is energy. And the part of our food that contains the energy is carbohydrates. And that includes sugars, starches, and fats. So in this gorgeous feast laid out here, where do we have carbos? Well, in the pasta for sure, and in the bread, and there's fats in the dairy, and in the animal, and in the fish. And there's other carbohydrates in the vegetables and elsewhere, but mainly that's where we're going to get them. And so just remember, carbohydrates is sugars, starches, and fats are carbohydrates. Carbohydrate. Look at that word. Carbon, carbon dioxide. Hydrate. I'm hydrated. I have water. So carbon dioxide and water form carbohydrates. So embedded in this word is the equation of life on Earth. So let's take a look at our picture of the Earth and our food and think again about energy. Energy enters ecosystems as sunlight, and it's captured by photosynthesis, and it's locked up in carbohydrates, and then it is transferred from organism to organism through feeding, and ultimately the energy leaves the earth as heat. So that's important to know also, that eventually all energy leaves, and the form it leaves is as heat after it's been processed by ecosystems. Okay, so what else besides energy do we get from food? Well, if you're a nutritionist, you think of proteins, vitamins, and minerals, but I want us to just consider something I call chemical macronutrients, and we're going to learn these, and we're going to focus in on a couple of them. So let's take another tack at this and consider wood for a second. So wood is 90% carbohydrate. Wood is 90% carbohydrates, 90% pasta. It's just in a form you can't eat. It's too hard and indigestible. Lignin and cellulose are carbohydrates. So these carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, these cycle in the biosphere via the equation of life on Earth. They cycle in the biosphere, and the atmosphere, and in the hydrosphere. And so they cycle via the carbon cycle and the water cycles. And I just drew a line to the carbon cycle because although I believe that the carbon cycle is very important and every human being on the planet should know about the carbon cycle, for this class we're not going to go into it. But you do know the water cycle because we've covered it already when we talked about weather. So, okay, the chemical macronutrients, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, those are three of them. And this bar chart just shows wood. 90% of wood is that stuff. You burn it off, it all goes out and back into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide or water vapor. And then there's this stuff left over, we call it ash, but it's composed of the rest of wood, which is 10%. What is it? Well, all living things are composed of chemical macronutrients, C, H, N, O, P, S, calcium, and magnesium. Yeah, I want you to memorize these. I think it's important. It's what composes your body every bit of food you put into it, and everything around you that's alive or has been living is composed of these things. Yes, I think you should know them. Come up with a mnemonic for memorizing CHNOPS. I just think of, I think some Egyptian pyramid was chops or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, that's how I remember it. CHNOPS. Well, what do they stand for? Carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur, calcium, and magnesium. Okay, so you need to know their abbreviations and the words they stand for. What we're going to look at is, well, CHO we have already looked at, so you know a lot about carbohydrates and carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen already. The other 10% of wood is nitrogen, phosphorus, and the other stuff, and we are just going to focus in this course and in the remainder of this lecture on nitrogen and phosphorus. I want you to understand these things for two reasons. One is they tend to be very limiting in ecosystems. So whereas sulfur, calcium, magnesium, and potassium are not so scarce. But these things, nitrogen and phosphorus, are very scarce, and that's why we apply them to our plants as fertilizer, because our plants don't need these other things so much. They really need these, so that's why we apply them. The other reason they're important is because we won't talk about it in this class much, but they're the source of a lot of pollution on the planet. So adding these to ecosystems can have profound unintended consequences. And thirdly, they're just plain interesting. So let's get to it. The nitrogen cycle for Ecotopia. So there's three forms of nitrogen I want you to know: nitrogen gas, nitrate, and amino acids. And I didn't list proteins, but amino acids and proteins go together. You probably already know that because you eat food and you've been paying attention to it. Let's take these three one at a time. First of all, nitrogen gas. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4 ways of depicting what nitrogen gas is. This says, well, they all say that nitrogen gas is composed of two nitrogen atoms stuck together in a molecular bond. Okay, so we can write it as N2, we can draw it as two atoms stuck together like a barbell or just smooshed together. But I really like this way of showing it because it shows that each N atom is bonded to the other N atom by 1, 2, 3 bonds, which means these are very strongly held together. And since they're strongly held together, they're very difficult to take apart. And it turns out that nothing on the planet can take these things apart except for a small number of microbial species of bacteria. And yet we desperately need nitrogen in our bodies, as you will see. So we desperately need it, but we can't use the nitrogen gas. 70% of our atmosphere is nitrogen gas, and we can't use it. So that is a problem that has been solved for us by microbes, as you will be seeing. Another form is nitrate. Now, we can't use nitrogen gas directly. You and I also cannot use nitrate directly. So that is not useful to us, except that plants can use it. Plants can take this nitrate up and turn it into amino acids. What's an amino acid? Don't worry, you don't really have to know the chemistry of it. Here are the 20 amino acids. There's 20 different kinds of amino acids that are needed by us in our diet to make protein. Take a close look at any amino acid and you'll see that somewhere in it has N in it. N is the nitrogen. Okay, so where'd that nitrogen come from? Well, some plant somewhere took up nitrate and stuck it, did some chemical magic and turned it into amino acid. Where did the plant get the nitrate from? We'll get to that in a sec. Okay, but you and I need to eat food that contains proteins with amino acids in them, or just amino acids directly, before we can make protein and live. So that's one way of looking at the nitrogen cycle, but it's not by any means complete. So I'm going to show you 2 or 3 more ways of thinking about the nitrogen cycle. But first, I just wanted you to get these basic forms: nitrogen gas, nitrate, and amino acids in your head. So This is actually the nitrogen cycle for kids. I got it off the web, and so I really wanted to keep this simple for you guys. And even all this, I'm going to simplify it for you. But it shows the same thing, only in a full cycle. Let's start with our nitrogen gas N2 in the atmosphere, and the arrows in blue go counterclockwise. So we have two arrows coming this way, and one of them leads directly to nitrogen-fixing bacteria in root nodules of legumes. A legume is like a bean or a pea. There's some trees too, a bunch of different plants that do this. They can take nitrogen gas out of the atmosphere, and there are these bacteria that live on the root in a very close relationship, and they're fixing the nitrogen, that is turning the N2 gas into nitrate, fixing it, and the plant takes it up directly. An alternative pathway is soil bacteria. There's 1, 2, 3 steps here that involve different kinds of soil bacteria. You don't have to know the different soil bacteria or the different intermediates, but in the end we get nitrate formed by these bacteria. Thank you so much, bacteria, because you're turning the nitrogen gas into a form that is usable, not by us, but by plants. And so we see assimilation taking place through the roots. The roots pick that free nitrate up from the soil. Great! So now we have plants that take the nitrate and are now turning it into what? Turning it into amino acids and proteins that can be eaten by animals. This gopher is just one of them. I like the choice of gopher there. Okay. So now we have the biosphere. We have plants and animals eating the plants and all kinds of critters making protein. Great. What happens next is, well, they poop it out, or they pee it out, or they shed their fur, or they spit, or they lose body parts like the plants do, or they die. And so all that stuff goes off into the soil, and it enters a I got lost here for a second. It enters a biosphere cycle where these guys will break things down but then re-assimilate the nitrate. And actually there's an arrow missing here. That was my hesitation. That when these guys, well, I guess it goes this way. The decomposers will break down the proteins, and I guess they give up ammonia, which they can then enter the cycle, be reformed as a nitrate and re-assimilated. The point that I want you to be sure you get here is that there is a cycling of nitrogen within the biosphere. Okay, so once it's in an amino acid form, as it leaves animals or plants, it can then re-enter plants and then animals later on through this through the biosphere. However, there are some little denitrifying bacteria that can take nitrates and release nitrogen gas. And so there's another bigger cycle that allows nitrogen to leave the biosphere as well, the fixed nitrogen. And so this is called denitrification, and we can get nitrogen gas regenerated. Okay, so I have another way. So study the nitrogen cycle until you're familiar with it at the level I'm giving it to you. I have another way to show the nitrogen cycle here, which is just with words. So we start with nitrogen gas, and through nitrogen fixation by those magic, wonderful, miraculous bacteria, nitrate is formed. Proteins can then be made by plants after they get it up. Plants and animals, well, we all traded around in the biosphere, but we shed, we excrete, and we die. Microbes then regenerate the nitrate, and it can be picked up again. So in red arrows is a nitrogen cycle within the biosphere, and yet some microbes can then can take nitrate, ammonium, or amino acids, or protein, and give off nitrogen gas. Okay, so then the atmosphere gets recharged after nitrogen fixation. So two different cycles, maybe a shorter term one and a longer term one. And at the bottom line here, nutrients cycle within ecosystems. Energy flows through ecosystems. Okay, energy sticks around for a little while, allows us to do stuff, but ultimately it leaves. Whereas the nitrogen does not leave. It cycles and cycles within ecosystems and within the four spheres. Okay. Another way of showing the nitrogen cycle, We've got leguminous plants that are have nitrogen-fixing bacteria on them, and they have protein in them. They're eaten by herbivores or omnivores, and they make meat, and we eat them, and we have protein for our beautiful hair, for our strong muscles, and for many other reasons. I can't really see myself, but I think I'm being peed on by this fountain, and so we excrete nitrogen, we dye, we cut our hair, whatever, and that enters the decomposer cycle and makes those nitrogen compounds available again for assimilation by plants, or the nitrogen leaves the biosphere altogether and enters the atmosphere. Okay, so a number of different ways to look at the nitrogen cycle. This way, and this way. Okay, that's the nitrogen cycle. Phosphorus is the other chemical macronutrient, the last one that I want you guys familiar with. It's fairly easy because it does not have a gaseous phase. There's no phosphorus in the atmosphere. It's found only in rocks and on the weathered and in the weathered products of rocks. It is extremely scarce in ecosystems, so it gets locked up in the biosphere, or it gets locked up in rocks. And you need it for bones. The enamel on your teeth is made of a form of phosphorus, and in your bones and in your metabolism, there's a number of biomolecules that contain phosphorus. So you absolutely need it to survive. Every creature on the planet absolutely needs it to survive, yet it's very scarce. And so we all have a number of different adaptations for scavenging as much phosphorus out of the soil as we can. I just wanted to show you two commercial sources of phosphorus. One is a phosphate mine, where they're taking the rocks directly, the phosphate-bearing rocks directly, and crunching them up and powdering them and selling them, or making weapons out of them, or whatever they do with their phosphorus. And here's another one. This is a gigantic pile of bat poop, also known as guano. And so basically there's some creatures that roost in large numbers in the same place year after year. That would include bats in caves, or birds on some oceanic islands. Over centuries the birds go out and fish, and they eat the fish, and they come back to nest or sleep, and they poop on the island, and it stays there and it builds up. And so these are actually economically valuable when found, because people mine them and sell them for fertilizer. So that's phosphorus. I'm not going to say too much more about it. Just wanted to show you this slide again. Remember, rock weathers. So if there's phosphorus in the minerals in this rock, as it weathers out, it becomes available to the biosphere. As soon as it's soluble, it's usually taken up by some organism. And again, that's why free phosphorus is very scarce in ecosystems. Okay. So phosphorus cycles within ecosystems in relatively short time periods, and that's this inner cycle, a cycling of phosphorus. So it enters, some plant picks it up out of the soil, and it's alive. The plant is eaten. It transfers to the herbivore. It dies. It goes to the next living thing, and eventually it'll be lost. And where it will be lost to is to the waterways, and it will go out and it will enter the ocean, and it may precipitate as a rock and enter the rock cycle. So this outer circle is the rock cycle, which takes, remember, goes from a sedimentary, maybe a metamorphic, to an igneous phase, and there's plate tectonics. So rocks are born, they live, and they die, only on much bigger lifespans than within biospheres. Okay, so I'm getting ready to conclude here, but check this out. Much of the nitrogen and phosphorus nutrients in Ecotopia, our area, the Pacific Northwest, may be derived from the ocean via salmon. From the Pacific Ocean, our terrestrial NNP come from the ocean via salmon, at least until modern times. So the idea is, I'll just finish this quote and then I'll kind of explain it. Here's a guy, T.E. Reimchen, said in 2004, about 10 years ago, up to 70% of the nitrogen in mosses, herbs, shrubs, ancient trees, canopy insects, songbirds, and bears in the coastal forests of Pacific Northwest is derived from the central Pacific Ocean via the life history of the salmon. And you can search them and find out. I think I'm going to post this link on Moodle so you can read it. It's very scientific, but it's interesting. The idea here is that salmon, they come up the rivers to breed, and there's a bunch of creatures that feed on their carcasses, and they'll feed them and leave some of the carcasses behind, and they will rot on the riverbanks and release their nutrients, which are then taken up by trees. Or the animals themselves take the nutrients up and they go live, poop, and die somewhere else, and those nutrients enter the ecosystem there, and they build up and they cycle. So this is a gigantic fertilization of the Pacific Northwest by the salmon. And I say that much of it may have derived from the ocean, at least until modern times, because as you probably know, human overharvesting and habitat loss or habitat change has really hurt the salmon, especially in the southern half of its range and maybe even farther north. So humans have changed this a lot. But I just wanted to bring that up because I think it's a fantastically interesting aspect of nutrients, and that's what we're talking about, chemical macronutrients. Okay, so in review, energy enters the biosphere, stays for a while, and then leaves. And nutrients cycle within the four spheres. They cycle within the biosphere, and from biosphere and the lithosphere and the atmosphere, that would be the nitrogen cycle, and carbon and hydrogen and oxygen, and the hydrospheres, and that would be the water. Okay, so nutrient cycle, energy flows through. Okay, so coming up, we're going to be taking a closer look at the relationships of the living organisms to each other, more exactly how nutrients flow and how nutrient cycle and energies flow through from organism to organism in coming lectures. So stay tuned, keep studying, have a good time. See you next time.